The cargo bay of the luxury transport ship Celestial Crown hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced technology. Princess Zaratiel of the Valdorian Empire stood near the viewing port, her crystalline blue skin shimmering under the artificial lights. Her 4 delicate arms moved gracefully as she adjusted her ceremonial robes, preparing for what should have been a routine diplomatic mission to the outer colonies. "Your Highness," her aide whispered, "we are approaching the Kepler station. The human delegation should already be aboard." Zaratiel nodded, though her stomach twisted with uncertainty. This was her first solo diplomatic mission, and the weight of representing her father's empire pressed heavily on her slender shoulders. The Valdorian Empire had recently made contact with the humans, a species that seemed unremarkable compared to the other races in the galaxy. They had no natural armor like the Krillian, no telepathic abilities like her own people, and certainly no advanced technology that impressed anyone. The transport docked with Kepler station with barely a whisper. As Zaratiel walked through the connecting tunnel, she rehearsed the formal greetings in her mind. Her diplomatic training had prepared her for this moment, but nothing could calm the nervous flutter in her chest. The station's reception area was smaller than expected, with simple metal walls and basic lighting. Standing near a maintenance console was a human male in worn coveralls, holding what appeared to be a diagnostic tablet. His hair was dark brown, slightly messy, and his hands were stained with some kind of lubricant. He looked up as she entered, and she noticed his eyes were an unusual shade of green. "Excuse me," Zaratiel said in carefully practiced Standard Galactic, "I am looking for the human diplomatic team. I was told they would meet me here." The human set down his tablet and straightened up. He was taller than she expected, probably 6 feet by human measurements. "You must be Princess Zaratiel. I'm Marcus Chen." She looked around the empty reception area, confusion growing. "Are you part of the maintenance crew? Could you please direct me to Ambassador Richardson or his team?" Marcus tilted his head slightly, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "There might be some confusion, Your Highness. I am the human representative for this mission." Zaratiel's 4 eyes widened in surprise. This couldn't be right. Where was the formal delegation? Where were the ceremonial robes, the official protocols, the impressive display of technological advancement that usually accompanied diplomatic meetings? I'm sorry," she stammered, "but surely there must be some mistake. You appear to be a technician or perhaps an apprentice?" Marcus's smile widened, but there was no offense in his expression. "I understand the confusion. Humans tend to dress for practicality rather than ceremony. I was actually checking the station's life support systems before our meeting. Old habits from my engineering days." The princess felt her cheeks flush a deeper shade of blue. In Valdorian culture, appearance and ceremony were everything. The idea that a diplomat would wear work clothes and perform manual labor was completely foreign to her understanding. "Please forgive my assumption," she said, trying to recover her composure. "In my culture, representatives dress according to their station." "No offense taken," Marcus replied easily. "Different cultures, different approaches. Would you like to proceed to the conference room? I believe we have much to discuss." As they walked through the station's corridors, Zaratiel couldn't shake her bewilderment. The human moved with quiet confidence, occasionally nodding to station personnel who greeted him by name. Several times, he stopped to help with minor technical issues, adjusting a wall panel here or checking a status display there. "Do you always involve yourself in maintenance work?" she asked, genuine curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. "When I see something that needs fixing, yes," Marcus said, his hands already working on a stuttering air recycling unit they passed. "My father always said that understanding how things work from the ground up makes you better at everything else." Within moments, the unit's irregular humming smoothed out to a steady rhythm. The Valdorian princess stared in amazement. In her society, such work would be left to specialized castes. The idea that someone of diplomatic importance would soil their hands with manual labor was incomprehensible. The conference room was simple but functional, with a circular table and basic chairs designed to accommodate various species. Marcus gestured for her to sit, then took his place across from her. On the table between them lay a datapad containing the preliminary trade agreements. "Your Highness," Marcus began, "I understand this is your first independent diplomatic mission. I want to assure you that despite appearances, Earth takes this alliance very seriously." Zaratiel straightened in her chair, trying to project the authority her tutors had drilled into her. The Valdorian Empire is interested in establishing trade routes through your space. In return, we offer access to our advanced crystal technology and manufacturing techniques. Marcus nodded thoughtfully as he reviewed the documents. These terms seem fair on the surface, but I notice there's no mention of mutual defense agreements or scientific exchange programs. The princess hesitated. Her briefings had focused primarily on economic benefits, with little consideration for military cooperation. The human military was widely regarded as primitive by galactic standards. The Valdorian fleet is quite capable of protecting our own interests, she said carefully. I'm sure it is, Marcus replied without any hint of disagreement. But space is vast, and threats can come from unexpected directions. We've learned that cooperation often provides benefits that pure strength cannot. As they continued their discussions, Zaratiel found herself increasingly puzzled by this human diplomat. He asked insightful questions about supply chain logistics, manufacturing capacity, and long-term sustainability that her own advisors had barely considered. Yet he maintained his casual demeanor, occasionally excusing himself to respond to technical questions from station personnel. During one such interruption, a young Krillian engineer approached Marcus with obvious distress. His natural armor plating was dulled with exhaustion, and his usually proud bearing was slumped with defeat. Marcus, we cannot solve the problem with the quantum resonance chamber. The harmonic frequencies are completely unstable. If we cannot fix this, the station's jump drive will fail, and we will be stranded here for months. The princess watched as Marcus's expression became thoughtful. Have you tried adjusting the primary crystal alignment? Sometimes the mounting brackets shift during long jumps. Of course we tried that first, the Krillian replied with obvious frustration. We have tried everything in the manual. The resonance patterns make no sense. Marcus stood up and turned to Zaratiel. Your Highness, would you mind if we took a brief recess? This sounds like it might be a serious problem. Zaratiel found herself nodding, though protocol demanded they continue their formal negotiations. Something in Marcus's tone suggested this was more than a minor technical issue. They followed the Krillian engineer through several levels of the station to the engineering section. The quantum resonance chamber was a massive crystalline structure, similar to technology used in Valdorian ships but configured differently. Warning lights flashed around the chamber, and the harmonic vibration was indeed chaotic and unstable. Marcus approached the chamber slowly, his eyes scanning the crystal formations with intense concentration. He pulled out a small diagnostic device from his coverall pocket and began taking readings at various points around the structure. The frequency modulation is wrong, he said after several minutes of careful observation. But it's not a mechanical problem. The crystals themselves are fine. The Krillian engineer's mandibles clicked with frustration. Then, what is causing the instability? Marcus looked up at the chamber's housing, then at the data streams flowing across nearby monitors. The problem isn't with the crystals. It's with the isolation field. You've got a harmonic feedback loop between the primary resonance frequency and the station's structural vibrations. He moved to a control panel and began making rapid calculations on his diagnostic device. If we adjust the isolation field's phase variance by approximately 12 degrees and increase the dampening coefficient, the feedback should disappear. The Krillian engineer stared at him in amazement. That should not work. The mathematical relationships are far too complex for such a simple adjustment. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones we overlook, Marcus replied, already inputting the new parameters. In my experience, most complex problems have simple underlying causes. As the new settings engaged, the chaotic vibrations gradually settled into a smooth, steady rhythm. The warning lights switched from red to green, and the entire engineering section seemed to exhale with relief. The Krillian engineer was speechless for several long moments. Finally, he managed to say, "How did you know to look for harmonic feedback?" This type of analysis requires years of specialized training in quantum resonance theory. Marcus shrugged modestly. I spent some time working on Earth's first quantum drive prototypes. You learn to recognize certain patterns after a while. As they walked back to the conference room, Zaratiel's mind raced with questions. The casual way Marcus had diagnosed and solved a problem that had stumped trained engineers suggested there was far more to this human than his appearance indicated. That was impressive, she said carefully. Your engineers must have excellent training. We have good schools, Marcus agreed, but most of what I learned came from hands-on experience. Humans tend to learn by doing rather than just studying theory. Back in the conference room, the princess found herself looking at the trade agreements with new eyes. The terms that had seemed generous before now appeared almost condescending, offering basic technology in exchange for access to human space routes. "Mr. Chen," she said slowly, "perhaps we should reconsider the scope of our potential partnership. If your people have the technical expertise to solve quantum resonance problems, our initial assessment may have been incomplete." Marcus's green eyes met hers with quiet intelligence. "Princess, I think you'll find that humans have a talent for exceeding expectations. We may not look like much on the surface, but we've learned to make the most of what we have." As the day's formal session concluded, Zaratiel realized her assumptions about both humans and diplomacy had been fundamentally challenged. This Marcus Chen was clearly not an apprentice or a simple technician. But, if he was truly representative of human capabilities, then, perhaps her empire's intelligence reports had severely underestimated Earth's potential. Standing at the viewing port as the station rotated slowly in space, she watched the distant stars and wondered what other surprises this alliance might bring. The formal protocols of her upbringing suddenly seemed less important than the practical wisdom she had witnessed today. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, Princess Zaratiel of the Valdorian Empire went to sleep with her worldview quietly beginning to shift in ways she couldn't yet fully understand. The next morning brought an unexpected emergency alert throughout Kepler Station. Princess Zaratiel was reviewing diplomatic documents in her quarters when the alarm klaxons began wailing. The station's artificial gravity fluctuated slightly, causing her ceremonial crystal ornaments to chime against each other in discordant harmony. Marcus's voice came through the communication system, calm despite the obvious crisis. "All diplomatic personnel to emergency stations. We have a situation developing in the outer system." Zaratiel made her way quickly to the station's command center, her forearms managing her flowing robes while maintaining her dignified bearing. The command center was a bustling hub of activity, with officers from several species working at various stations. Large displays showed tactical information that made her stomach clench with worry. "What's happening?" she asked as she approached Marcus, who was standing near the central command console. "Long-range sensors detected 3 ships approaching the system," Marcus replied, pointing to the display. "Configuration matches Zarathi raiders. They're still several hours out, but their trajectory suggests they're heading directly for this station." The princess felt her blood run cold. The Zarathi were notorious throughout the galaxy as ruthless pirates who showed no mercy to any species. They traveled in heavily armed ships and had never been successfully negotiated with. Their technology was a mixture of stolen equipment from dozens of conquered worlds, making them unpredictable and dangerous. "How many people are on this station?" she asked, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "About 800 permanent residents, plus another 200 visitors and diplomatic personnel," Marcus answered. "The evacuation ships can handle maybe half that number if we're lucky." Commander Thexkar, an imposing Krillian with battle-scarred armor plating, approached with obvious agitation. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he spoke. "The nearest military vessels are at least 10 hours away. The Zarathi will be here in 6. We cannot possibly evacuate everyone in time." Zaratiel looked around the command center with growing desperation. The various officers were clearly competent, but she could see the same calculation in all their eyes. There simply wasn't enough time or ships to save everyone. "What about the station's defenses?" she asked. Commander Thexkar's expression darkened further. "Kepler Station has basic defensive shields and 2 light plasma cannons. Against 3 Zarathi raiders, it would be like throwing pebbles at a war machine." Marcus had been quiet during this exchange, studying the tactical displays with intense concentration. Finally, he turned to the Krillian commander. "Thexkar, what's the maximum range on our sensors?" "Standard range is about 4 light hours," the commander replied. "Why do you ask?" "And, the Zarathi ships are currently 3 hours out at their present speed," Marcus continued, his voice taking on a different quality. "That means they started their approach from well within our sensor range, but we didn't detect them until now." Commander Thexkar's mandibles stopped clicking as he considered this implication. "You think they have cloaking technology? Or stealth modifications to their ships?" Marcus confirmed. "Either way, it means they've been planning this attack for a while. They know exactly what they're facing here." The princess watched this exchange with growing confusion. Marcus's casual demeanor from yesterday had been replaced by something sharper and more focused. His questions weren't those of a concerned diplomat but of someone with military training. "Marcus," she said carefully, "you seem to know quite a bit about tactics and sensor technology." He glanced at her briefly before turning back to the displays. "Humans have had to learn about such things. Space can be a dangerous place." Lieutenant Veltar, a young Andromedian officer with distinctive purple markings, approached with additional sensor data. "Sir, we're getting more detailed scans of the approaching ships. They're definitely Zarathi configuration, but they've been modified extensively. Heavier armor, upgraded weapons systems." Marcus took the datapad and studied it carefully. His expression grew more serious as he reviewed the information. "These aren't typical raiders. This level of modification takes serious resources and planning." "What does that mean?" Zaratiel asked, though she suspected she didn't want to hear the answer. "It means someone hired them specifically for this attack," Marcus replied grimly. "The Zarathi don't usually invest this much effort unless the payoff is guaranteed to be substantial." The implications hit her like a physical blow. "You think someone wants to disrupt the diplomatic mission?" "It's possible," Marcus said, then turned to Commander Thexkar. "I need to access the station's defensive systems. All of them." The Krillian commander hesitated. "Marcus, you are a diplomatic representative, not a military officer. I cannot authorize civilian access to our weapons systems." Marcus's green eyes met the commander's compound ones directly. "Thexkar, in the next few hours, the distinction between civilian and military isn't going to matter much. Everyone on this station is going to have to fight if they want to survive." Something in his tone made the commander pause. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that we stop thinking like diplomats and start thinking like survivors," Marcus replied. "The station's defensive systems were designed for deterrence, not real combat. But, with some modifications, we might be able to level the playing field." Princess Zaratiel found herself stepping forward. "What kind of modifications?" Marcus moved to one of the technical displays and began calling up schematics of the station's structure. "The plasma cannons are mounted on fixed positions. Against fast-moving raiders, they're nearly useless. But, if we can create overlapping fields of fire and use the station's rotation to our advantage, we might be able to create a defensive pattern that's harder to avoid." His hands moved quickly over the control interface, highlighting structural elements and power conduits with the familiarity of someone who had studied such systems extensively. "We'll also need to redistribute power from non-essential systems to boost the shields. And if we can modify the sensor array to create false readings, we might be able to confuse their targeting systems." Commander Thexkar studied the proposed modifications with obvious surprise. "These recommendations are quite sophisticated. Where did you learn military engineering?" Marcus paused in his work, and, for a moment, his casual mask slipped entirely. "Let's just say that Earth has faced its share of threats. We've learned to adapt." Lieutenant Veltar looked up from her station with urgency. "Commander, the Zarathi ships have increased speed. They'll be here in 4 hours, not 6. The command center erupted in increased activity as officers began implementing Marcus's defensive modifications. Zaratiel watched in amazement as he moved from station to station, offering technical suggestions and coordinating the upgrade efforts with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. "Marcus," she said quietly as he passed her position, "who are you really?" He stopped and looked at her directly. "I'm exactly who I said I was, Princess. I'm a human diplomat trying to establish peaceful relations between our species. But I'm also someone who believes that peace is only possible when you're strong enough to defend it." Before she could respond, alarms began sounding again. The tactical display showed new contacts appearing at the edge of sensor range. Not 3 ships, but 6. The original 3 were just scouts, Marcus said grimly. The real attack force was waiting for confirmation that the station was vulnerable. Commander Thexkar's natural armor plating seemed to darken with stress. 6 Zarathi raiders. Even with your modifications, we cannot possibly survive against those odds. Marcus was quiet for several long moments, studying the tactical situation with intense concentration. Finally, he turned to the communication officer. "Can you establish a secure channel to Earth Defense Command?" The officer, a nervous Centaurian with delicate features, looked to Commander Thexkar for guidance. Sir, that would require accessing classified military frequencies. Do it, Marcus said with quiet authority. Authorization code, Shen 77 Alpha Delta. The princess felt her world shift again. Military authorization codes were not something civilian diplomats possessed. As the communication was established, she heard Marcus speaking in rapid, technical language that sounded nothing like diplomatic discourse. Command, this is Agent Chen at Kepler Station. We have a code red situation developing. 6 confirmed Zarathi raiders approaching with attack intent. Request immediate support authorization Alpha 77. The response came back immediately, Agent Chen, support authorization confirmed. ETA 4 hours. Hold position and protect diplomatic assets at all costs. Agent Chen. Not Diplomat Chen. Agent. Zaratiel's 4 eyes widened as understanding dawned. Marcus had never lied to her, but he had certainly allowed her to make assumptions. He was indeed a diplomatic representative, but he was also something much more. Marcus turned to find her staring at him with a mixture of shock and realization. Princess, I apologize for any deception, but my primary mission has always been to ensure your safety and the success of this alliance. You're not just a diplomat, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm a diplomat who happens to have additional training, Marcus replied carefully. Earth believes that in a galaxy full of potential threats, our representatives need to be prepared for anything. Commander Thexkar approached with obvious relief mixed with suspicion. Agent Chen, what kind of support can we expect? Marcus's expression became unreadable. The kind that will ensure the Zarathi regret choosing this station as a target. As if in response to his words, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. Ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, moving with purposeful precision toward the approaching Zarathi fleet. The configuration was unfamiliar, but the energy signatures were definitely human. Those ships, Lieutenant Veltar said with obvious confusion, they don't match any known human vessel configurations in our databases. Marcus's smile was thin and dangerous. Princess, I think it's time you learned something about humanity that didn't make it into your intelligence reports. We're very good at keeping secrets when we need to. The approaching human ships moved with a coordination and speed that surprised everyone in the command center. Their formations were tight, their acceleration curves perfect, and their approach vectors showed tactical awareness that spoke of extensive combat experience. How many ships? Commander Thexkar asked. 12, Marcus replied. More than enough to handle 6 raiders, even modified ones. Zaratiel watched the tactical display with growing amazement. The human ships were smaller than the Zarathi vessels but moved with fluid precision that suggested advanced technology and skilled crews. This was not the primitive space force that galactic intelligence had described. Agent Chen, she said formally, I believe we need to have a very different conversation about human capabilities. Marcus nodded, his attention split between the tactical situation and her obvious shock. After we deal with the immediate threat, Princess, I'll be happy to discuss a more accurate assessment of what Earth brings to this alliance. The Zarathi raiders had detected the approaching human ships and were altering course, but their options were limited. They had committed to the attack and were too far into the system to escape easily. The command center held its collective breath as 2 forces prepared to meet in the void of space. Whatever happened next, Zaratiel knew her understanding of humanity had been fundamentally changed. The quiet diplomat in coveralls had revealed himself to be something far more complex and capable than anyone had imagined. And, somewhere in the back of her mind, she began to wonder what other surprises the human species might be hiding behind their unassuming exterior. The battle began with a silence that seemed to stretch across the vast emptiness of space. On the command center's main display, Princess Zaratiel watched 12 human vessels arrange themselves in a formation that appeared almost artistic in its precision. The ships were sleek and angular, their hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases, Lieutenant Veltar reported, her purple markings flickering with nervous excitement. Their power output readings are, that can't be right. Marcus stood behind the tactical console with the calm confidence of someone watching a carefully planned operation unfold. What readings are you getting? The lead ship is showing power output equivalent to a Valdorian heavy cruiser, the lieutenant replied, her voice filled with disbelief. But it's barely half the size. Commander Thexkar's mandibles clicked rapidly as he studied the tactical display. Marcus. Agent Chen, what exactly are we looking at? The future, Marcus replied simply. Humanity has had to accelerate our technological development considerably in recent years. We've learned to be efficient. The first exchange of fire lit up the display in brilliant flashes of energy. The Zarathi raiders opened with their traditional tactics, spreading wide and attacking from multiple angles to overwhelm their targets. Their modified ships moved with predatory grace, their stolen technology creating a formidable display of firepower. The human response was unlike anything the observers had ever seen. Instead of meeting the Zarathi attack with conventional tactics, the human ships seemed to flow around the incoming fire like water moving around obstacles. Their movements were too precise, too coordinated to be achieved by individual pilots acting independently. Are they using some form of hive mind technology? Princess Zaratiel asked, unable to hide the amazement in her voice. Not exactly, Marcus replied, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. Humans have always been good at working together. We've just found ways to make that cooperation more efficient. One of the Zarathi raiders, a massive vessel bristling with weapons from a dozen different species, focused its fire on what appeared to be the smallest human ship. The concentrated barrage should have been more than enough to overwhelm any vessel of that size. Instead, the human ship's shields absorbed the impact with barely a fluctuation in their energy readings. Impossible, Commander Thexkar breathed. No ship that small can generate shield strength sufficient to withstand that level of firepower. You're thinking about it wrong, Marcus said calmly. You're assuming the shields are generated by that single ship. As if to illustrate his point, the tactical display suddenly highlighted energy transfer beams connecting the human vessels. They weren't fighting as individual ships but as a single, integrated system. The shields, weapons, and sensors of all 12 vessels were somehow linked into a unified defense network. The Zarathi, realizing their conventional tactics were failing, began to adapt. They had survived as raiders by being flexible and vicious, learning from every encounter. The lead raider ship launched a spread of quantum torpedoes while simultaneously deploying electronic warfare countermeasures designed to disrupt enemy coordination. The human response was immediate and devastating. Instead of trying to intercept the torpedoes, 3 human ships simply vanished. Not destroyed, not disabled, but gone completely from all sensors. The torpedoes passed through empty space where the ships had been moments before, finding no targets to lock onto. Cloaking technology? Lieutenant Veltar asked. Something like that, Marcus confirmed. Though perhaps more accurate to say they stepped sideways. Before anyone could ask what that meant, the missing ships reappeared directly behind the Zarathi formation. Their sudden appearance caught the raiders completely off guard, and the human vessels opened fire with weapons that seemed to ignore conventional physics. The energy beams didn't travel through space in straight lines. Instead, they curved in, twisted around the Zarathi ship's defensive screens, striking vulnerable points with surgical precision. It was as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions that humans had chosen not to follow. What kind of weapons are those? Princess Zaratiel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gravity manipulation technology, Marcus replied matter-of-factly. We learned to bend spacetime to our advantage. Useful for both defense and offense. The battle was effectively over within minutes, though it took the Zarathi several more minutes to realize it. Their ships found themselves unable to target the human vessels accurately, while their own shields and armor provided no protection against weapons that attacked from impossible angles. When the lead raider attempted to ram one of the human ships in a final desperate gesture, the human vessel simply wasn't there when the Zarathi ship arrived. Instead, the raider found itself surrounded by all 12 human ships, caught in a web of gravitational fields that held it motionless. The voice that came over the communication channel was calm and professional. Zarathi vessels, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Princess Zaratiel turned to stare at Marcus with new understanding. Chun. You're related to the Admiral? My sister, Marcus confirmed with obvious pride. She's always been better at the military side of things. I prefer the diplomatic approach when possible. The Zarathi surrender was swift and complete. As the human ships began boarding operations, Princess Zaratiel found herself reassessing everything she thought she knew about Earth and its capabilities. Agent Chen, she said formally, I believe my government has severely underestimated humanity's technological advancement. That was the idea, Marcus replied. We found it useful to let other species make assumptions about our capabilities. It helps us avoid unnecessary conflicts. Commander Thexkar approached with obvious respect tinged with wariness. The boarding operations are proceeding smoothly. The Zarathi are offering no resistance. Admiral Chen's forces have also recovered significant intelligence data from their ships. Good, Marcus said. I suspect we'll find evidence that this attack was sponsored by someone with considerable resources and a vested interest in disrupting our alliance. As the immediate crisis passed, the command center gradually returned to normal operations. But nothing would ever be quite the same. The revelation of humanity's true capabilities had shifted the balance of power in ways that everyone present was still trying to understand. Princess Zaratiel requested a private meeting with Marcus in the station's diplomatic quarters. As they walked through the corridors, she noticed that station personnel now looked at him with a different kind of respect. Word had spread quickly about the human diplomat who had somehow summoned an advanced military force to their rescue. You've been playing a very complex game, she said once they were alone. Your entire species has been playing a complex game. Marcus settled into a chair across from her, his casual demeanor returning now that the immediate danger had passed. Not a game, Princess. A survival strategy. Humanity emerged into a galaxy full of species with thousands of years of spacefaring experience. We had to find ways to level the playing field. By hiding your true capabilities? By allowing others to underestimate us while we develop those capabilities, Marcus corrected. It's an old human strategy. We call it speak softly and carry a big stick. Princess Zaratiel's four hands gestured in the Valdorian expression for profound contemplation. The trade agreements we were discussing yesterday seem rather inadequate now. My government offered you access to our crystal technology, but it appears your own technology may be more advanced than ours. Different, not necessarily more advanced, Marcus said diplomatically. Valdorian crystal technology is elegant and efficient. Human technology tends to be more direct in its approach. There's still value in cooperation and exchange. But the balance of power is not what we thought it was. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his expression becoming more serious. Princess, let me share something that didn't make it into your intelligence reports. Humanity didn't develop this technology in isolation. We had help. Her eyes widened with surprise. Help from whom? From species that most of the galaxy has forgotten or dismissed. The Kalari refugees from the Outer Rim. The Zephyrian engineers who lost their homeworld to cosmic storms. The Praxian scientists who were exiled for their unconventional research methods. Understanding began to dawn in her expression. You gave sanctuary to the outcasts. We gave them homes, resources, and respect, Marcus confirmed. In return, they shared knowledge and perspectives that no single species could have developed alone. What you see as human technology is actually the combined wisdom of dozens of species working together. The implications were staggering. While the major galactic powers had focused on maintaining their own technological supremacy, humanity had been quietly gathering the discarded knowledge of the galaxy's forgotten peoples. That's why your ships move the way they do, she said with growing realization. Kalari phase-shifting technology combined with Zephyrian energy manipulation and Praxian gravitational control. Among other things, Marcus nodded. We've learned that diversity of thought and approach leads to innovations that none of us could achieve alone. Princess Zaratiel stood and moved to the viewing port, looking out at the human ships that still patrolled the space around Kepler Station. Their clean, purposeful lines now spoke to her of hidden depths and unexpected capabilities. Agent Chen, she said slowly, I think we need to completely renegotiate our alliance. Not as a minor species seeking access to Valdorian space, but as equals with unique strengths to offer each other. Marcus joined her at the viewing port. That's exactly what we were hoping you would say, Princess. Though I think the conversation will be more complex than either of our governments originally anticipated. Complex how? Because there are other threats out there that make the Zarathi look like schoolyard bullies, Marcus replied grimly. The galaxy is changing in ways that few people understand. If our species are going to survive what's coming, we're going to need each other more than anyone realizes. As if summoned by his words, a new alert sounded throughout the station. Lieutenant Veltar's voice came over the communication system with barely controlled urgency. All senior personnel to the command center immediately. We're receiving priority signals from deep space. Something big is happening in the Outer Rim territories. Marcus and Princess Zaratiel exchanged glances before hurrying toward the command center. Whatever new crisis was developing, they would face it together as allies rather than the unequal partners they had been just days before. The universe, it seemed, was about to test their newly forged partnership sooner than anyone had expected. The command center buzzed with intense activity as Princess Zaratiel and Marcus arrived. The main display showed a tactical overview of the galaxy's outer rim territories, with multiple red indicators flashing across sectors that should have contained thriving colonies and trade routes. "Report," Marcus said with the authority of someone accustomed to command situations. Lieutenant Veltar looked up from her console, her purple markings now pale with stress. "We're receiving distress signals from 17 different systems in the Outer Rim. All communications cut off within the last 6 hours. No response to our attempts to re-establish contact." Admiral Sarah Chan's image appeared on the central communication screen, her expression grim despite their recent victory over the Zarathi raiders. "Marcus, we need to talk. What we found in the Zarathi computer systems changes everything." "Go ahead, Sarah," Marcus replied, gesturing for Princess Zaratiel to join him at the communication station. "The Zarathi weren't just hired to disrupt your diplomatic mission," Admiral Chen continued. "They were part of a larger operation designed to eliminate key alliance-building efforts throughout this sector. Someone wanted to prevent cooperation between Earth and the Valdorian Empire specifically." Commander Thexkar approached with additional data. "Agent Chen, we've been analyzing the pattern of systems going dark. They're not random targets. Every system that's gone silent was either a major communication hub or a strategic resource depot." Marcus studied the tactical display with growing concern. 17 systems don't just go dark simultaneously without coordination. This is a military operation on a massive scale. Princess Zaratiel felt her blood chill as the implications became clear. "You think someone is preparing for a large-scale invasion? Or already carrying one out?" Admiral Chen confirmed from the communication screen. "The timing is too precise to be coincidental. Someone waited until key diplomatic initiatives were underway before launching this operation." A new voice interrupted their discussion. A Kalari technician, one of the refugee species Marcus had mentioned, appeared on a secondary screen. His translucent skin showed the stress patterns typical of his people when dealing with severe emotional distress. "Agent Chen, Admiral Chen," the Kalari said in heavily accented Standard Galactic, "my people have knowledge of this enemy. We have seen this pattern before." Marcus immediately turned his attention to the Kalari technician. "Velnash, tell us what you know." 200 years ago, our homeworld was attacked by entities that did not seek conquest or resources," Velnash explained, his form flickering slightly with emotional intensity. "They sought elimination. Complete erasure of technological civilizations. We called them the Void Seekers." The command center fell silent except for the quiet hum of electronics. Princess Zaratiel had heard legends of the Void Seekers in ancient Valdorian texts, but they had been dismissed as mythology. "Velnash," Admiral Chen said from her ship, "are you certain about this identification?" "The pattern is identical," the Kalari confirmed. "First, they eliminate communication networks to prevent coordination between potential targets. Then, they systematically destroy any civilization capable of faster-than-light travel or advanced energy manipulation." Commander Thexkar's mandibles clicked rapidly with agitation. If these Void Seekers are real, why haven't the major galactic powers encountered them before? "Because they have been sleeping," Velnash replied. "The ancient records suggest they operate in cycles, emerging every few thousand years to cleanse the galaxy of what they consider technological contamination." Marcus turned to Princess Zaratiel with an expression of grim determination. "Princess, this changes our alliance from a matter of mutual benefit to one of mutual survival. If Velnash is correct, every technologically advanced species in the galaxy is now under threat." Before she could respond, new alerts began sounding throughout the command center. The tactical display updated to show massive energy signatures emerging from deep space. Ships unlike anything in any known database were approaching the galaxy's inhabited sectors at impossible speeds. Configuration analysis shows vessels approximately 10 kilometers in length, Lieutenant Veltar reported, her voice tight with controlled fear. Energy output readings are off the scale. And they're not following any known laws of physics. The ships on the display move through space in ways that defied understanding. They seem to phase in and out of normal spacetime, covering vast distances instantaneously before reappearing in completely different locations. How many ships? Admiral Chen asked from her position. Sensors show at least 50 confirmed contacts, came the response. But the phase shifting makes accurate counting difficult. There could be many more. Princess Zaratiel watched the display with growing horror. Each of those ships was larger than the Valdorian Empire's greatest battlecruisers, and there were dozens of them approaching from multiple directions. Agent Chen, she said formally, what are Earth's capabilities against threats of this magnitude? Marcus was quiet for several long moments, studying the tactical situation with intense concentration. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of difficult decisions. Sarah, he said to his sister's image, initiate Protocol 7. Admiral Chen's expression became even more serious. Marcus, Protocol 7 hasn't been tested on this scale. The risks are acceptable compared to the alternative, Marcus finished. If the Void Seekers are truly what we're facing, conventional tactics won't be sufficient. Princess Zaratiel found herself asking, what is Protocol 7? Marcus turned to face her directly. Princess, I told you that humanity had helped developing our technology from refugee species throughout the galaxy. What I didn't mention is that we also received warnings about threats that most civilizations aren't prepared to face. The Praxian archives contain detailed records of the previous Void Seeker incursion, Velnash added, including theoretical countermeasures that were never tested. We've spent the last 50 years preparing for this possibility, Marcus continued. Protocol 7 involves activating defense networks that span multiple star systems, using technology that combines the best innovations of dozens of species. As if summoned by his words, new contacts began appearing on the tactical display. Not ships, but massive installations emerging from what had appeared to be empty space. Hidden defense platforms, cloaked monitoring stations, and weapons systems that had been quietly positioned throughout human space over decades of careful preparation. Incredible, Commander Thexkar breathed. How long have you been building this network? Since the first Kalari refugees arrived and shared their warnings, Admiral Chen replied. We learned early that the galaxy can be a dangerous place. We decided to be prepared. The scope of human preparation was staggering. What had appeared to be a relatively young and technologically limited species had actually been constructing the most sophisticated defense network in galactic history. Hidden installations, advanced weapons systems, and coordination networks that span dozens of star systems. Princess Zaratiel realized that her species' intelligence services hadn't just underestimated human technology. They had completely missed the existence of what amounted to a shadow empire dedicated to defending against threats that other species considered mythical. Why didn't you tell anyone about this? She asked. Because most species wouldn't have believed us, Marcus replied. And those that did believe might have considered our preparations a threat to their own security. It was safer to work quietly and hope we'd never need to use what we'd built. The first engagement between human defense platforms and Void Seeker ships occurred at the edge of the Sol system. The energy signatures from the battle were visible even on Kepler station's long-range sensors, massive flares of exotic energy that spoke of technologies beyond conventional understanding. The defense platforms are holding, Admiral Chen reported. But, barely. These Void Seeker ships are more advanced than our worst-case projections. Marcus studied the incoming data with growing concern. Estimated time until they break through the outer defense perimeter? At current rates, maybe 6 hours, came the grim response. Then, we move to the next phase, Marcus said with quiet determination. He turned to Princess Zaratiel with an expression that was both apologetic and hopeful. Princess, I'm about to ask something of you and your people that goes far beyond any diplomatic alliance we originally discussed. What do you need? She replied without hesitation. The Valdorian crystal technology, Marcus explained. Combined with our gravity manipulation systems and the Kalari phase-shifting capabilities, we might be able to create a defense network that can actually stop the Void Seekers permanently. But that would require unprecedented cooperation between our species, she said, understanding immediately. Sharing our most advanced military secrets. It would require trust, Marcus corrected. The kind of trust that can only exist between species that truly consider each other equals. Princess Zaratiel looked around the command center at the various species working together to coordinate the galaxy's defense. Humans, Kilari, Krillians, Andromedians, and others, all contributing their unique capabilities to face a common threat. Agent Chan, she said with formal dignity, I hereby authorize the immediate sharing of all Valdorian crystal technology with the Earth Defense Force. May our combined knowledge prove sufficient to protect all civilized species. The next few hours would determine whether the galaxy's hidden defenders could stand against an enemy that had destroyed countless civilizations over millions of years. But, for the first time since the crisis began, Princess Zaratiel felt a spark of hope. Humanity had proven to be far more than they appeared. Perhaps, working together, the galaxy's diverse species could prove to be more than the sum of their individual parts. As the great battle for galactic civilization began in earnest, she stood beside Marcus Chen, no longer seeing a humble diplomat in coveralls, but a representative of a species that had spent decades preparing for this exact moment. The Void Seekers had awakened to find a galaxy very different from the one they had terrorized in ages past. This time, the scattered species of the galaxy would stand together, guided by humanity's patient preparation and unified by the trust that had been forged in the crucible of crisis. The princess smiled grimly as she watched the tactical displays. The Void Seekers were about to learn why humans were considered apex predators, not just on their own world, but throughout the galaxy. And why underestimating humanity was the last mistake any enemy would ever make.